Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. This is Eight Sided Freaks, and today we have our favorite episodes to record. UFC pay-per-view previews. Today we have UFC 308, headlined by Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway, a fight that everyone is pumped to see, and thankfully it's rounded out with a pretty good main card and some good prelims as well. So it's not just a one-fight card. We've got a whole fight card here, filled with some fun fights. So we've got a fun day of fights ahead of us. I was going to say night of fights, but kicking off early. Main card starts, I believe, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Prelims a couple hours before that. So early or midday on the East Coast, and early morning over on the West Coast. So morning and afternoon of fights. So obviously, we'll kick it off right at the main event. Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. Anthony, we can throw it over to you first. What are you thinking for this main event in terms of excitement level, things that stand out to you, just where you're at right now with the main event?
I think this is as exciting as it gets. I want to say last week you said this was the best fight that the UFC could make in the entire UFC. I think, Holloway's always been one of the most entertaining fighters, and especially coming off his, last couple performances. I think everyone's excited to, well, I guess not only see him fight again, but honestly to see him fight for the belt again, because there was a chance there that that would never happen with Volk being champion. And then, of course, Ilia upsetting Volk in tremendous fashion with the knockout and stuff. Um, and he's really passed every test with flying colors so far. So I think it's a good one. It's definitely one of the most hyped fights, for at least from my perspective, in a while.
Oh yeah, I'm right there with you. Love that it's an early card. First of all, it's nice to wake up and immediately go into some UFC. But as far as the main event, I'm pumped. This is one we've been waiting for a while. Since really Max won the BMF, it was kind of is this actually going to happen? Is he going to go do something else? But I'm so ready for this fight. It's gonna be a fun one, to say the least. It's one we've been waiting for a while, and as you said last week, James, this is definitely the best fight you can make in the entire UFC. So we'll see how it goes because history isn't great for the older guys, but at least Max isn't quite 35 yet, so still got a chance there.
Yeah, and like you guys both said, I think this is the best fight you can make in the sport in terms of both matchup wise, how these guys, like when you put them in the octagon against one another, I think it's going to be a great fight. And then just looking at like from a skills perspective, like I don't really care what the pound for pound rankings say. I don't think there's like a matchup of two fighters that you can book that is more highly skilled. Um, and I guess the only ones that you could say are involving these guys when they fight Volkanovski. Those would be like the biggest competitors, in my opinion, for in terms of the amount of skill that you can pack into one fight is when Volkanovski is fighting one of these two guys as well. But I think Volkanovski is a little bit past his prime, unfortunately, right now. So I think that leaves us with Max and Elliott at the moment. Um, so before I forget, I'll say the odds now. We don't have to get to the part where we make picks or anything quite yet, but I do want to throw the odds out there because they are, I think, a little bit more wide than people were expecting. I think the average line right now is about plus 200 Max Holloway, minus 240 on the Topuria side. So reasonable favorite. It's past that 200 mark. Um, Personally, I think one of the reasons for that is because Max is jumping around weight classes a little bit. He goes up to 55. And one of the talking points to him fighting at 55 was that he was bigger than his previous fight at 55. He added the muscle. And now he's going back down to 45. So I want to get your guys' thoughts on whether you think that is a good idea or not. Jerry, we can throw it over to you first. What are your thoughts on Max Holloway coming back down to 145 to try and get that featherweight belt back?
I mean, I'll start out by saying I'll watch Max sit featherweight, lightweight. If he wants to move up to heavyweight, I'll watch him fight at heavyweight. It doesn't matter for me. But it is a little concerning because it wasn't like it's a quick turnaround. So at least he's had time to recover and get back down to that featherweight. It's not like he fought two pay-per-views ago or 2 months ago in that aspect and has to quickly cut back down. He's a professional. He's been doing this forever, so I have no real concern about it. But I'm wondering to see how his power will be, because obviously he went up, and that was one of our questions when he moved up to 155. How was the power and the speed going to transition? Now that he's been up there, I wonder if he's going to still have that same power, if he's with the cut and how it goes and all that, if he's going to lose a little bit of a step. And Ilia is a guy you do not want to lose any sort of step to. So I think he'll be fine. I'm fine with him moving around as long as he's staying active. I will be curious to see if he wins the belt on Saturday. Will he stay down and defend it a couple times, or will he bounce around, defend the BMF, do all that? And I wonder if will he even still be allowed to keep the BMF if he wins the title?
Yeah, I think too, like you said, if he wins it, I mean, there's that Diego Lopez fight and stuff. So, but I mean, as we've always said, he's cleared out almost everyone in the entire division. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. And then obviously, if Topuria wins the belt, there's still so many fights for him there. But overall, I think one of the other things I'm interested in too is that, it's a 5-round fight. We've always seen, Max has never struggled to go 5 rounds. Matter of fact, he just probably had one of the best knockouts ever. 10 seconds left in the 5th round in the last one. And that was at a weight class up, if maybe you thought that might affect his cardio a little bit. And I think Topuria is the only time he's won 5 rounds with Josh Emmett. Yep. So a little bit different of a striker from Max with the volume and stuff. So I don't know. We'll see. I think just when it comes to in terms of cardio, and I think if Max, if he can get this, I'm hoping it's not. If it goes anyways, I'm honestly hoping it's not an early knockout. I would rather see some fun striking and maybe a little bit of wrestling. Topuria probably has that edge, even though Max has a pretty great takedown defense throughout his career. But yeah, I'm hoping for a later fight where we really get to see both of their skills showcased over multiple rounds as well.
Yeah. I think Max going down to 45, I think is my biggest question here. Just because he looks so good at 155 against Gaethje. And I think it's interesting to go, I'm going to move back down to 45 after looking great at 155. That is a little bit of a concern for me. But I do have a little bit of hope for Max in the sense that if he wins this fight, I'm very interested to see what the future holds for him, because maybe he stays in defensive, or maybe he just tries to parlay his Gaethje knockout and then a win over Topuria. I think there's a world where he tries to parlay that into a double champ fight against Islam, because people want Gaethje to fight for the title, and then he goes out there and knocks Gaethje out. Little detour back down to 145. I think it'd be reasonable for him to go back up and fight at 155 pounds for the belt. And then not have to worry about 145 anymore. I do think there's a decent chance that happens, but obviously that hinges on winning this fight, losing this fight. On the other hand, I still think if he loses, I think 155 is absolutely no doubt decision. And then you can talk BMF fights, counter fights, Chandler, Poirier, guys like that. So that's kind of where my head is for Max moving forward. And as far as this fight goes, I do think the cardio, like you said, Anthony, will be a big part of it. And I think Ilia can go 5 rounds. But at the same time, the one time we saw him go 5 rounds, he was front running a lot in that fight. That wasn't a fight where Emmett's out there landing body shots and testing him and landing his own hard shots. That's pure front running. And maybe Topuria can go 5 rounds, 5 hard rounds. But you don't really know that right now. So I'm interested to see what happens if he's getting kicked in the body. He's throwing a lot of heavy shots, hasn't gotten the knockout. It's round 3. So that's kind of what I'm looking for in terms of his cardio.
Yeah, and I do want to just put this out there, talking about the lightweight and all that. Max jumped up 3 spots in this week's rankings. Jumped over Hooker, Chandler, and Dariush. I'm wondering, do you guys think it's just because he's fighting this weekend, they want to make it a bigger thing and say, oh, he beat the number 5, or he's the number 5 and the number 2 in 2 divisions? And at the same time, if he does lose, like what you were saying, James, it sets him up being the number 5 ranked lightweight now to have a big fight. He already beat the number 3 guy. could see him go out and maybe try and fight someone else in that top 5, find a Conor McGregor or otherwise, or Chandler or someone, and try and get a title shot there shortly.
Yeah, you'll see random ranking changes sometimes when the weak guys fight. Suddenly, the Tuesday before, you go rank from number 5 to number 4, and you're like, all right. It's like, I guess now the main event looks a tad bit better than it did previously. But I think it was a reaction to Dana White getting mad at the rankings, and I think the people who have votes for the rankings went in there, adjusted some things, and one of them was moving Holloway up, which personally I actually still think he's too low at 5, but moving him up, good start.
Yeah.
I mean, I think regardless of where the rankings are, if he chooses to go fight lightweight, he'll be basically a top 5 title contender, all that stuff. So, whatever division he chooses to fight, he will be a title contender in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now to kind of swing this over a little bit more about like the matchup itself. Do you guys think we're getting pure striking, or do you think we're going to see either of these guys mix in grappling? Because obviously, Topuria is a good grappler. He's got a submission win over Bryce Mitchell on his record. Holloway has attempted some takedowns throughout his career. The Yair Rodriguez fights, the most recent example where he went out there and wrestled proactively and landed several. He was rolling for the Darce choke against Korean Zombie. So we've seen both these guys go out there and grapple. Do you guys think this is going to be, we're going to go out there and strike for 5 rounds or however long it lasts? Or do you guys think we're mixing in grappling here? Anthony, I think it's your turn to lead us off.
I do think Topuria is like one of the most complete fighters, so I can see him trying to use some wrestling for sure throughout the fight. Like I said, though, I mean, Max is pretty solid with takedown defense, so I think it will be tough to land some of those takedowns. And when it comes to Max, maybe a change of pace late round to win it. But like you just said, I think Korean Zombie and Yair are both susceptible to getting wrestled as their predominant strikers. Different styles of striking, but I can give or take. Yair can get some finishes on the ground too, though. But I would say it's going to be the easier path to probably get him down rather than sit and strike with him, as wild as he can be. So I don't know if we'll see Max try to go for too many takedowns or wrestling, but I think honestly it would be a little smart for sure for Topuria to try to mix that into the game plan, especially since we've seen it work with Volk so much in those couple fights. The way he's able to mix in his striking with some takedowns, with some clinch work and stuff. So.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't think Max will really be going for takedowns. Maybe he'll just throw one out there just because why not? Try and catch Topuria off guard. But I think Topuria, I mean, he has 8 submission wins in his career. Only one in the UFC, bunch in the 7 on the regional circuit and on his way up. It wouldn't surprise me if, say, he starts out and I'm expecting round 1 to be pretty much all on the feet. I'm expecting the early round to be them going at it. And I think if Max gets any pressure, like wins the round, Topuria will suddenly be like, okay, we can't just strike with this guy because, as you know, Max is elite on the feet and not elite striking. So maybe he changes his game plan. He's like, okay, we toyed with him a little bit. Now let's go for the takedown and see if we can get a submission on the ground or some ground and pound and get that extra damage. I'm really curious to see how Max's takedown defense will be. He has had good takedown defense in the past, but Topuria is a different monster. And I will say, if Topuria, he might just be feigning takedowns, just get him to drop his guard a little bit, drop his hands, and then go up for something, an overhand or a hook, or try and mix it up to keep Max honest and not just stand there and make this a sole kickboxing match.
Yeah, I think that if Topuria is able to do that and get Max guessing a little bit on takedowns and things like that, he could have a lot of success just based on the way he enters the pocket, especially against taller guys and rips hooks. If he can enter the pocket, feign a takedown, come over the top and get Max dropping his hands, he could land massive shots that way. But ultimately, I think that the grappling, if we see any grappling at all, which I think we will, I think it's going to be late round stuff, 1 minute left in the round, minute 30 seconds, basically we're going to be in the final stages of the round, and I think that could be a way for Topuria to win close rounds. Especially, for example, we talked about cardio earlier. Especially like round 3, for example. If you're talking about winning a decision in this fight, I think round 3, obviously, Topuria's got a little bit of an advantage in the early rounds, Max a little bit of an advantage in the later rounds. That means round 3 ends up being a pretty important round if you're going to the judges. So I think rounds like that in the middle stages, I think if Topuria can land a takedown, and ride out a few minutes of control time in a close round. So I think if there's 50-50 rounds that you don't really know who it goes to, I think that's the times you're going to see takedowns from Topuria to go out there and try and swing those close rounds in his favor. So I think that is how we see grappling, but I do still think we're going to see a large majority of this fight be striking, like north of 75% of it is probably going to take place on the feet, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think too. I was going back to because I know Topuria is the favorite and stuff. So I was looking at his past fights, and I think one thing for Max, which you could probably say this about anyone, like no one, there is only one Max Holloway. But I'm saying even a striker at that level, Topuria just like he fought Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell's not a good striker. Josh Emmett. More of the heavy hands, overhand specific and stuff
Shorter.
like that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then even you could say obviously Volk is a great striker, but I some of that fight too, I do think is a little bit Volk past his prime, and just the whole Islam saga back to back, coming back off a knockout and stuff. So not that fight has an asterisk, but there's some. If one of the best ever is going to lose, I would prefer if it was under different circumstances, a little bit leading into that fight. And then he fought Ryan Hall, god awful striker. So I mean, some of these fights, and then when you look at Jai Herbert was actually, from what I remember, did a little decent with the striking in one of those first rounds, and then obviously Ilia got that insane knockout, and even going all the way back, I see in 2020, Yusuf Salah, pretty pretty good striker too, but then even in that fight, Ilia 5 for 9 on takedowns. So it's interesting to see what Max can get going, and like kind of like we were just talking about how much Topuria does shoot, but I think the way Max always does is just his absolute huge toolbox of weapons, the way he chains everything together, the different amount of strikes he's throwing, the combos and volumes. I wonder if that could get to Topuria the same way we saw get to Gaethje and really mess up his rhythm and everything, the way he's always great at finding shots. So there's that. I could see that for Max giving issues to any fighter, but I am worried about, Max always has the hardest chin and stuff like that. But it's just, that question if it can always hold up, especially how we've seen Topuria with the power he packs. And then if Max is going for those, 3-4 punch combinations, if he's going to be there for to get cracked, like Volk caught him on the third or fourth punch, but maybe Topuria's power is really just next level, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and I'm just pulled up Ilia Topuria's stats because I'm curious, like his takedown percentage, Max's takedown defense. Max defends takedowns at 84%, so nothing insane by any means, but he does a very good job. And it's really just been for Topuria. He lands with 56%. He didn't have a single takedown against Volk. He had 3 against Josh Emmett, who isn't a grappler by any means, and he had 5 against Yusuf Zalal. So it's not like he's been taking down people at a consistent rate and consistently every fight. It's really been like 3 fights where he's actually landed a takedown. He was taken down against Bryce Mitchell, reversed it, and got the submission there. So he is still good on the ground, but the trend is setting it to be like, I don't know how much ground he might actually do and how well his takedowns will actually land.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. One other thing I think is interesting is the length of these two guys. I think it's a weird dynamic to where you usually look at the guy who's longer and give them advantages. And I think that's true in this fight. I think Max has a list of advantages because of his length. For example, like Anthony said, the Jai Herbert fight, Jai Herbert had success, dropped Topuria with a head kick. And we've seen longer guys give Topuria a little bit more problems, even though Topuria is great, has great footwork, gets inside at a very good rate for a shorter fighter. But at the same time, Volk went out there and had a lot of success against Max as someone who is shorter and size comparable for Max. So I think it's a really interesting matchup to where I think you could make a case to both guys' size and stature playing into the other fighter's weakness, which I don't think there are a lot of fights where it kind of goes both ways, where both is going to be at an advantage based on the other person's style and thus also being at a disadvantage. I think it's very interesting to see that both be present at the same time, because I can't think of very many fights where that is true, especially at a championship level of this magnitude where we see that type of dynamic. So I think that's really interesting. And then the other thing that I'll be really interested in is in a pure boxing match, I think Ilia wins. But I'm really interested. One of the things that I love about Max is I think Max is the best at looking at who he needs to fight and figuring out what he needs to do and not do to go out there and win. In terms of what weapons he goes out there and throws. For example, you saw that spinning back kick much more against Gaethje than you did against anyone else because he knew he needed that weapon specifically for Gaethje. So I'm going to be interested here in what weapons he picks up and shows more frequently that we haven't seen as much in previous fights. I guess it would be kicks. Topuria doesn't really kick much. When he does, it's mostly leg kicks. I'd be really interested to see if Max goes out there and shows some teeps, shows some kicks to the body, tries to take some kicks upstairs. I'm really interested to see how he incorporates those into his game, because I think the mixing in some kicks or maybe some elbows or some knees are going to be what hurts Topuria rather than, typical boxing exchanges.
And kind of like you just said with specific things, I wonder if that spinning back kick can carry over a little bit from the Gaethje fight too, because we've seen Topuria, take opponents to the fence a little bit, kind of push them towards the fence and really get going. And that was at the end of the first round. Gaethje kind of had Max going backwards a little bit to the fence, and then Max whipped out the spinning kick to the body, the spinning back kick right there. So I think it could still be there maybe, but also Max is pretty good octagon presence and cage work to always, get off the fence and stuff. So he has good like ring craft. So, we'll see. But I think I could see if Topuria really tries to put the pressure on him, back him up, get him close to the fence to maybe another spinning hook. I don't know if it'll land to the nose and like break his nose again, because that was kind of ideal for your first time whipping that out, but it could still be there.
Yeah, I do have like one other kind of question in the back of my mind. We saw Max go up and fight Justin Gaethje, arguably the hardest puncher in the entire lightweight division. Now he's going back down, fighting Topuria, who's arguably the hardest puncher in 145 division. Do you think the fact that he went up and fought Gaethje and the power's that extreme that he might not have as many issues with Topuria's power? Because I know Topuria's come out and said he kind of wants to be the first one to knock him down and knock him out. And age catches up with you at some point. So I'm wondering if there will be some sort of benefit to him having fought someone that powerful in his last fight.
I think it's close. That's actually really good, because, yeah, it should work out like that. You just faced the hardest puncher at a division up, so it should, help you a little bit. But I don't know. Power's, what is it? Precision, what speed beats timing or whatever, precision beats power, all that stuff. So I do obviously think when someone hits as hard as Topuria, one shot will do it. But maybe for those ones that aren't pure knockouts, the ones that when they're trading in the pocket, and maybe Max has the confidence after going to Gaethje to just take one more, to give one more. But I don't know if even that's necessarily the game he wants to play with Topuria. But it is interesting. It could definitely give him some confidence in some aspects of while trading.
I think Gaethje hits it really, really, really hard, but I think Ilia is like significantly better at like boxing. Like if you were to both put them in a boxing ring or against another boxer, like Ilia is the one who'd go, yeah, that's a boxer. Gaethje doesn't really look like a boxer, to be honest. So Gaethje hit him really hard, and I personally think he dropped Max in that fight. He went down, landed on the butt. They didn't count the knockdown, and Max still has that never been knocked down stat on his record. But I think Ilia can hit him hard, and I think Ilia is going to hit him much more frequently than Gaethje did. So I think Ilia is more of a cross between Volkanovski landed a lot of shots on Max in the third fight with his technique and approach to that fight. I think that is kind of mixed with someone who can go out there and hit him really hard. I think Ilia hits a lot harder than Volk, so that would be my concern. It's not necessarily the one-shot KO, but it's Max has been hit a lot, and every single one is coming at you with great accuracy and landing really hard. So that, I think, is a bigger concern if we were to see Max's chin get cracked. I don't think it would be one and done. I think it'd be, eating multiple big ones. And like we said earlier, he's dropping from 55 to 45. Who knows how that cut is going to go? If the cut doesn't go that well, obviously he's going to be in the rehydration. He could be a little bit more live to get knocked out as well.
That's what my two last things when it comes to power is I remember kind of like we said, so Corey Anderson, I can't remember if he was fighting was it Jimmy Manuwa, but that's when Manuwa was going on his big knockout run, and Corey Anderson had psyched himself up so much, so he was like, because everyone kept saying, oh, if that one, I don't know if it was right or left hand, but if that right hand lands, he has so much power, you're gonna get knocked out, and he got hit by it, and he said like psychologically, like subconsciously, he thought he was going to get knocked out if he got hit by the right hand. He got hit by the right hand and he got knocked out. But he was like, punch wasn't even like the most insane thing. Like I've been hit harder before, but he like convinced himself because of all the outside media or factors that, oh, if you get hit by it, you're going to go to sleep. And he said he just kind of subconsciously, like probably could have stayed in it, but he had just, when you tell yourself you're going to get knocked out so much and it happens, it works out that way. So fighting Gaethje, I can see that maybe going in Max's favor. And then the other thing is, like James was saying with Topuria's boxing is so much better. They always say that the punch that lands the best or hits the hardest is the one you don't see coming. So I can see that if Max getting caught off guard in that aspect by Ilia's power, if Ilia's boxing is so pure that Max just doesn't even see that one strike that lands, kind of almost like I don't think Volk really saw that hook against the fence too that Ilia got, and that dropped him obviously, and then Ilia followed up. So I can see maybe Max for sure maybe getting that record taken away from him with getting dropped in this fight, but we'll just see how he can stay in and if he can avoid the quick ground and pound, maybe regather himself and stay up.
I think that's also a situation where the submissions of Topuria could become a real issue. Where if Max gets dropped, now all of a sudden you're in a guillotine or you're in a darce where you're trying to fight back to your feet. The good old Charles Oliveira special. I hate he smoked Gaethje with the hook. Then the next thing you know, the guy with the best rear naked choke in the business is, on your back trying to choke you out. So I think that could be an issue as well. For Max. And the other thing I will say about knockouts is I think that Ilia was in his last fight. I think he was in a position against Volk where I think Volk for the first time in his career, he found out the hard way against Islam that he can be knocked out. And then, he's going in there again against Topuria, and Topuria went out there, landed a shot, and, mentally, Volk kind of, he had the unfortunate evidence and the awareness that he can be knocked out cold. And it's just a little bit different of a mentality of when, you've won however many fights in a row, never been knocked out, and then you go out there, get knocked out, and then now you're in there again, and you know that it's possible for you to get knocked out clean. At this point, I'd say Max is at the opposite end of that spectrum to where he doesn't have that belief, and maybe that leads to over-aggressiveness, and that hurts him. But I also don't think he's going to go in being completely, scared of the power. I think he'll at least, I guess another comparison would be guys who fight Pereira. You see Roundtree wasn't scared of the power. He went out there and landed more shots. He ultimately lost, but I think there's quite a bit of a skill difference there. So you can't be scared of the power is my overall point, and I don't think Max will be.
I agree with you.
All right. Now let's wrap this one up with some predictions. Don't need anything too crazy or too concrete, but I do want to get a general consensus from everyone as to where we think this fight is going. It's Thursday, so we are a little bit later in the week. But what do you guys think the outcome is going to be here in this main event? Jerry, it's your turn to lead us off.
The heart says Max, the head says Ilia. And I think it's, at the end of the day, it'll be and still, only because of, one, he does have good boxing, and two, it's that threat of takedowns. That if the stand-up game isn't working, he can have that in his back pocket, which I don't necessarily think Max has in his back pocket as well. So I'm taking Topuria, kind of pulling for Max just to see what he can do, but I think it'll be the Spanish Georgian who wins the belt again.
Yeah, I'm leaning Topuria as well. Just like I said, I think he's a complete fighter. I do like some of the avenues he has to win. With the power, with the boxing. I do like some of the things that it's 5 rounds. We can, really test Topuria. Max can really test Topuria see how Topuria handles volume striking for 5 rounds, maybe a bit of adversity. He hasn't had crazy amount in his career. So there are some things for Max I like. I just don't know how hopeful I want to be in those things to like play out in the fight and really hang my hat on it. But I definitely am leaning Topuria, but it's hard to bet against Max. So, and it's always fun to bet with Max or pick Max. So we'll see. See how I'm feeling if I really want to root for the underdog and have that type of. I guess I can't say fight night, but fight day. But as of right now, I'm still leaning Topuria.
Yeah, so I'm very conflicted here as well, because I have a lot of respect for Max, and Max is also my favorite fighter by like a mile. So there's a little bit of that fandom that comes in. But I'll also say I have never picked a Max fight incorrectly, I don't believe, especially since I've started working at the site. Prior to the site, I think I may have picked Max in Max Volk 2. I think he won that fight anyway, so I'll count that one for myself. But I don't even remember off the top of my head what I picked there. So, but I know since I started working at the site, I haven't picked the Max Holloway fight incorrectly. So part of that makes me want to pick Max and just keep riding the streak. Also against Gaethje, Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje was the most money I've ever won betting on a UFC fight. I did proceed to lose it all against Jamal Hill and Alex Pereira, but so we walked out slightly ahead on the bookies that night. But that particular fight, Max Holloway helped out the bankroll. So very conflicted here for like a lot of outside reasons that don't even involve the fight itself in the matchup. But I will say I think it's a little bit closer than the odds suggest. I am gonna pick Topuria. I just think Max gets hit a little bit too much, and I think that's gonna be enough for Topuria to win 3 rounds, mix in the grappling to help him swing 3 rounds. So I'm gonna take Topuria to win by decision. I think he wins 3 rounds clean enough. That said, I think it'll be a close fight, and I think there are things that Max can do to win the fight. Like I said throughout our previews, mixing in kicks, things we've talked about, pushing the pace in the later rounds, and he absolutely cannot let Ilia get out to like a big early lead and let Topuria front run. It can't look like It can't look like Max and Volk 3, where he let Volk get out to the early jump and let him kind of lead from there. Cannot look like that. He's got to, if he's going to lose early rounds, it has to be competitive early rounds, and he has to be landing shots in those rounds. So I do think Max has a chance, but like I said, I'm leaning Ilia decision here. So that is the pick. All right. Any closing thoughts on the main event before we switch it over to the co-main?
It's going to be fun. That's it.
It is. Yeah.
Cannot wait.
I agree. All right. Co-main event. Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. 5-round co-main event. And Chimaev is one of those guys, you don't really know what you're going to get from Chimaev. Hopefully we get the fight. It is Thursday, so I'm optimistic at this point we get the fight. Right now, we have Chimaev as a favorite. Pretty much the same line as the main event, minus 240 for the favorite Chimaev, plus 200 on Robert Whittaker. What do you guys make of the co-main event? I believe it is Jerry. I believe it's your turn to lead us off.
I just want it to actually happen. That's my biggest concern. I saw some highlights from the press conference this morning, and Chimaev definitely looked a little tired, a little weary, had his head down just on the table. So that always never a good sign considering his history. But if this fight does go ahead, I love it. It's a huge test for both guys. We know what Robert Whittaker can do, but this is the first true highly ranked middleweight that Khamzat will have faced. Last fight he had at middleweight was Kamaru Usman on 10 days notice. Kamaru Usman moving up a division. To me, that doesn't count. I know it's Usman and all that, but that's not a top-ranked guy, and it doesn't get any harder in this middleweight division than fighting a guy like Bobby Knuckles. He's been around forever. He's beat everyone except for Izzy for the most part, and I guess DDP now, but I think it'll be a fun fight. It'll be an intriguing one because it's like similar to the Topuria one. Robert Whittaker, definitely majority a striker. Khamzat can strike, but also has a very good ground game. So I'm sure we'll get into the details in a little bit, but that's just my concern that we have two very similar fights as the co and the main.
Yeah. Overall, I'm excited. This fight was already booked, obviously. I think to some people it probably kind of worked out though. Whittaker got that last second fight against was it Ikram, and got the knockout in the first round, which probably maybe even gave people more confidence or more excitement for this fight, seeing Bobby finally get a knockout again. Because I want to say the odds were probably stacked heavier against Whittaker maybe before that knockout. So overall, I think that just created more excitement for this fight. Like you said, hopefully this happens, but I'm just more excited to see this fight. I think if Bobby wins, there should be real serious title talks on the after this fight. And then for Khamzat, as much as the hype train has been up and down with all these fights and stuff, and had to take pauses because of always pulling out of fights and health issues and stuff. This is finally Chimaev's turn to really fight a top ranked guy, and if he gets this win, because people have been wanting him to fight for the title for a while. Well, if you beat Whittaker, it's finally real serious now. I'm okay with possible title shot after beating someone like Whittaker.
Yeah, and I was going to try and find the odds for when they were first booked, but off the top of my head, I would pretty confidently say that the odds have shrunk and have closed a little bit. So, and going back to the Ikram Aleksandar fight, like I think like the situation that this fight has kind of had around it, I think helps Rob a lot. He basically got 2 training camps for Chimaev and got to fight like a Walmart version of Chimaev in the octagon. Like Ikram and Chimaev are not the same fighter, but one of like when you were talking earlier about psyching yourself up and fighting someone who can knock you out, the same thing in my opinion is true against these heavy grapplers. Like you go out there scared of the grappling, you don't put your hands together. So I think it helped Whittaker to have a training camp for Chimaev, and then basically off that training camp went out there, used the same game plan to fight Aleksandar, wins that fight by first round knockout, and then just goes right back into the training camp for Chimaev again. So at this point, he has had a lengthy amount of time to prepare for Chimaev. Whatever he's going to do, it hasn't been done with the lack of preparation. And Whittaker is another guy who I'd love to see Whittaker prepare. I'd love to see him put his mind towards how he's going to approach a fight, because he's one of those guys who has a well-rounded skill set. He can grapple, and he has a lot of tools on the feet. So giving him a training camp and a lot of time to think about how he's going to approach a fight, I think is a tough thing for his opponent. So that I think is what would give me the most optimism for Whittaker winning the fight.
I will just bounce off that and say at the same time, wouldn't that mean that I know Khamzat had to pull out for the last one, but he has the same lengthy time and has had 2 chances to kind of prepare for Bobby Knuckles. Just throwing it the other way as well. I'm just thinking. But
No, exactly. I agree with that. He's also, but I do feel like Hamza kind of comes in with the same game plan no matter who he's fighting.
that's
Compared to, I do think too, like you said with Whittaker, obviously you want to see finishes, but when he was on that run after that first Adesanya loss, um, it's tough to unanimous. This like it's tough to win fights, but not even let them be split. And he was going on a run of unanimous decisions against contenders, but in different ways each time. Like you were saying, he perfectly crafts during his prep time the way he wants to take, using one skill more than the other. Obviously, he still kind of always has the same little blitzing style with the striking and stuff, but maybe using more kicks. I know against Darren Till, he was doing the knee stops a little bit more, going way back. And then Vittori's a meathead. You can hit him, so he's got to keep his distance. But I feel like he was pretty cognizant of what specific skills and tools he needed for each fight. And so, yeah, I am excited for this one. I was going to take Bobby regardless, but I think finally getting that knockout even gives me more confidence that he might be able to get the job done in this fight as well.
Mm-hmm. I will say that run that you just referenced was a sensational run. Judges cannot figure out who wins fights. So when you're winning unanimous decisions, that means you want them clear
yeah.
as and
it should have been capped off too with the title at the end of it. But
yeah. Like his Vittori fight, for example. I remember betting Robert Whittaker decision that fight, thinking you can't finish Marvin Vittori. He's got a blockhead. And in the third round, I was going, oh, wait, Robert, don't finish him. You're having a little bit too much success here. Against Gastelum. Gastelum's a great wrestler. Whittaker was out there landing takedowns because he was able to mix things up so successfully. So he can do things like that. To kind of rain on the parade a little bit, my big concern with Rob is the durability. I'm less concerned today than I was a couple fights ago. He went out there and got hit pretty hard against Paulo Costa and didn't drop. So things like that will give me a little bit more optimism, but I'm really interested to see how the early grappling stages look, because Khamzat simply has grappling success against everybody. Like I know Usman was in there on very bad circumstances, but he was getting in some ridiculous positions against Usman. And that's not easy to do in grappling phases. I am interested, and then on the other hand, Gilbert Burns, he felt an armbar against Burns and said, no, thank you. I will strike with you. I'm interested if Robert Whittaker can give him a feel that makes him confident enough to strike, because that's when Robert can land big shots on the feet. So I am very conflicted on this fight, but I do think it will be Chimaev with a lot of grappling success in round one, and it's going to basically come down to, does Rob survive and hear that bell? I think that's going to be the difference maker, because if Chimaev doesn't pace himself at all, I think Rob's going to have a lot of success in 2 and 3 on the feet. Because what Chimaev can't do is what he did against Usman, where him and Usman were just kind of staring at each other in rounds 2 and 3. Yeah. If he does that against Robert Whittaker is going to close the distance and land big shots. So I think that's a real possibility. But like I said, getting out of round one's a tough task.
With this being a 5-round fight,
I was going to say, is it 5 rounds?
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so perfect. I was kind of really banking on that. Okay.
And that
my bad.
That benefits Rob massively, because I think it was the Gilbert Burns fight for Khamzat where he maybe got, I don't know if he got dropped, but he got rocked a couple times in that third round. I think he did get dropped. I could be mistaken on that, but
Gilbert Burns hit him so hard with the counter right, his head did a 360.
Yeah.
The shoulders. Yeah. Gilbert landed some shots, I'll tell you that much.
And that's only one of 2 decisions he had, and the other was that Usman fight, which, as you just said, they kind of stood around and just looked at each other for 10 minutes at the end. If this goes and Khamzat doesn't get it done in the first 2 rounds, I think he is in for a rude awakening as that fight goes on, because he's not known for having a great gas tank. Sure, he's probably durable, but really been able to see that yet for most of his fights. So I think if it goes late, it's going to be a domination in those last 3 rounds for Robert Whittaker.
And I think an interesting thing is, if you look back at his previous fights, and we're playing a little bit of a what-if game, but what if Chimaev's previous fights were 5 rounds? He probably loses to Burns and Usman. He probably loses both of those fights. Obviously, maybe he fights differently, and he manages to win those fights. However, you just have to think, if we saw both those fights, at the end of that fight, you're going, I would have loved to see 2 more rounds of that one. In either scenario, I think he would have lost those fights.
Yeah, and that's where I'm leaning. I'm trusting, Bobby next to be the veteran, to get his striking going a little bit. Hopefully, avoid that big shot. Like you said, that is my biggest concern. It's tough watching a fighter maybe even get better in some aspects of striking as he gets on, but he's just getting older and the chin isn't there anymore necessarily, especially with someone that, was going toe to toe with Yoel when he was the scariest person around. I think twice too. So it's tough to, like I said, see if he can get better at some aspects, but just father time, he just can't beat that one aspect. Maybe he's lost some speed though too. So it's just kind of the physical attributes are declining a little bit. But Khamzat, you always got to be scared, especially those first 2 rounds, but of the grappling, of the submission. But Jerry, like you were saying, that's why I think if Bobby can just get out of those first 2 rounds. I thought Khamzat was declining in both the Burns fight and the Usman fight in the 3rd round. So if you get to the 4th or 5th round, I can't. And Bobby's always had a great gas tank too, so I can't not want to even multiply my excitement for Whittaker in those 4th and 5th round if it gets there. And maybe you could actually see a finish in a 4th or 5th round too, which would be really insane for people that don't think Whittaker can finish. That would really shock them. But overall, I mean, he is a little bit of a decision king as he's gotten a little older and stuff. So if he can just play it smart and avoid the danger early, I do see a lot of success, like you were saying, in those later rounds. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for. And that is one of the main paths to victory too, I see for him. So
I think Whittaker would spark him if it gets to the late rounds. If it gets to 3 and 4 and 5, I don't think it goes to decision. I think he gets a finish if it goes to the late rounds. So, and to add even more to this, Gilbert Burns is not a cardio monster by any means. And Usman came in on short notice, coming off 2 losses. So it's not like Usman came in on a hot streak. It kind of looked like Usman was willing to lose a decision in that one and just take the props for showing up, basically, against the scariest guy, a weight class up. I don't think either of those fights were those guys in prime, going into those later rounds. So I'm starting to lean even closer to a Whittaker pick. But yeah, so I'm gonna take Chimaev in rounds 1, probably with the large asterisk next to it that if it gets out of round 1, I think Whittaker gets the job done.
This is okay. Yeah, for my, I kind of obviously kind of showed where I was going, but yeah, for my pick, like you said, Whittaker is always one of my favorite fighters. So a little biased, gonna lean him. I will say what I forget, because it's just been so long from that original hype train, so many time off between fights. I also thought Chimaev was always a bit overrated for as elite and skilled as he is, just because he wasn't fighting the right talent. And even it's like, when we gotta go back. I mean, you can't really take that was a pretty solid Burns. I don't know if that was prime Burns necessarily, but so I mean that's a good one regardless. But then when we have to talk about Chimaev and hype him up, we got to go to that Usman fight, and that's not prime Usman at all. That was, no knees, coming off the couch, 3-round fight, and he looked beatable. Chimaev looked very beatable in that. So that's the other thing. This to me would be the fight if Chimaev can win it. Okay, not that I'm disrespecting him, but I'll put more respect on his name with all that and what he's doing. But I do just think, Rob beats everyone in the division for a reason outside of now DDP, who's putting down a good resume, but it was Izzy was the only person he couldn't beat. So I'm gonna take Whittaker to be elite and just be heads above people that aren't champions. And so I'm hoping for a win here. And then I think, yeah, like we've been saying, those late rounds we'll see, and a finish here would be amazing too. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning with you, Anthony. I think I'm gonna pick Rob when it's all said and done, but it's that threat of if Khamzat gets him down and gets him submitted very quickly, which is a real possibility. But I think I'm gonna lean Robert Bobby Knuckles, just because he has beaten everybody, barring what you just said. He also this is why I wanted to see Khamzat fight Paulo Costa so badly, because it gives us a real kind of standing of how good is he in this middleweight division. And now this is not Paulo Costa. This is a guy who's a lot better, who just beat Paulo Costa earlier this year. It's going to be a good test for him. And hey, if he gets it done and submits or knocks out Robert Whittaker, I'm all back. I'm all for the hype train. That's well deserved. And maybe we'll see him get a title shot against DDP after I think he fights Sean Strickland early in the new year.
Terrible.
Yeah, it's such a stupid fight. Don't even get me started. I hate Sean Strickland. The more I think about this, the more I want to pick Whittaker. But I'm just gonna right now. I'll stick with my Chimaev pick. But when push comes to shove, and I'm putting the final line on that preview, I haven't written that one yet. When I put the final line on it, it may just have to end with Whittaker. I may just have to swing the pick. So that tells you how close I'm kind of bouncing back and forth on that one.
I'll be waiting for the article.
All right, moving down on this card, another massive fight: Magomed Ankalaev versus Aleksandar Rakic. And talking about hype trains, Magomed Ankalaev has basically been every MMA nerd's best light heavyweight for the last 10 years. It feels like. Nobody loves Magomed Ankalaev than someone who wants to feel like they know what they're talking about. But he does have some serious skills. He isn't very good. Aleksandar Rakic went out there in his last fight, lost to Yuri Prochazka, but a lot of people forget that was a sensational fight that was going to win fight of the night if Max Holloway and Justin Gaethje didn't fight on that card. Those two guys went out there, and it felt like they agreed that they were going to try and win that $300K for that performance bonus. Yuri still ended up getting it with the knockout bonus, but Rakic went down on his sword trying to get his $300K too. So that was a great fight. And I do think this is a number one contender fight, in my opinion. As much as, I don't love Ankalaev, and Rakic really hasn't done a ton, I just think they're in a great position where Alex has fought a lot of these light heavyweights. He hasn't fought either of these guys. You're basically getting a win over one of the other guys that hasn't fought the champ yet. So I think it's a number one contender fight. So I'm pumped. Do you guys agree that this is a number one contender fight? Anthony, I think it's your turn to lead us off.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Especially kind of like you exactly like you just said, based off who Pereira's already fought and stuff. And I know everyone's been wanting that Ankalaev fight too, because they think his wrestling could be the thing to finally dethrone Pereira, or at least give him those issues. I guess it's fair to say Pereira still hasn't severely really been tested with wrestling, so I get it. And then Rakic was on I don't know, I can't remember if it was a good run or just a 1 fight or 2 fight win. Blew out his ACL, came back from it, and then started to look great again. And I guess the one thing I will say is I had Jerry in that Rakic fight. Rakic fought amazing. Like I was sitting there like, oh my God, I kind of underestimated him against Jerry. He's going to win. And he just, for some reason, was fighting the perfect fight and could not knock Jerry out at all. And then towards that second round, I can't remember when it got finished, but you could just see like the difference between power and strikes. Like what Rakic could land 5, and then if Jerry landed 1, it was like the same level of effect. So that fight always baffles. It was amazing to watch just someone that was picking Jerry, but Jerry was just flat out losing a little bit, just flat out losing. But you could just keep telling it didn't seem like it was doing much. Didn't seem like it was doing too much, besides the leg kicks, obviously. But every time he would try to go upstairs, there was just a difference. So that kind of going forward, I guess it will help in her because it shows you Rakic could just be elite and look perfect, but what does that mean if it's not resulting in a finish at all? Because there's no reason that he shouldn't have been able to get Jiri out of there, unless you want to say Jiri's an absolute warrior that was, tapped in with some
Samurai.
whatever the books he reads, the samurai and stuff. So training, just yelling in the snow while training and stuff might have been the only way. The best base for MMA is to be a freak, apparently. But so I don't know. Overall, this is also just one of the best fights you could make outside of a Pereira fight in that division. So number one contender for sure.
Yeah, I think it has to be. And I mean, you look at who the other guys ranked high up in that division is Jiri. Pereira's beat him twice. Jamal Hill, Pereira beat him. Jan Blachowicz, Pereira's beat him. They need another challenger, and I think this is the perfect one to decide that. Knowing that, we're going to see another draw because last time Magomed Ankalaev had a real chance at getting a UFC belt. He decided to kind of mess around with Jan Blachowicz and finish in a draw. We'll say the most intriguing thing about this, and it's partially, I know we're not to picks yet, but both of these guys passed a serious test in this division, the Anthony Smith test. One of them did it by knockout, the other did it by decision. Take it for what it's worth. One of those is a little more impressive.
I think they both also passed the Thiago Santos test.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And not the prime Thiago Santos
No.
test, the washed Thiago Santos test. And I believe both were very timid striking battles that had about 3 strikes thrown a minute, I believe, if I remember correctly. So, but odds here, I'll throw those out now. Odds, we've got a little bit of a bigger favorite here this time out. We'll go with, I'd say the average line is looking like a minus 400 on Ankalaev, the favorite, and plus 285 on the underdog. Now, my biggest problem with Magomed Ankalaev, for as skilled as he is, one of the best wrestlers in the division, hits hard, can knock you out, fairly good techniques on the feet, good kicks, well-rounded fighter, but he might be the dumbest fighter to ever step foot in the octagon. Like, honestly. Like, he will go out there, and it's like, what is this game plan that you have crafted up for yourself? Like, I don't know how it took him to round 4 to attempt a takedown on Jan Blachowicz, but it was baffling. It was absolutely baffling. So in this fight, it's a 3-round fight. He is so live to just go out there and, like, trade straight shots with the guy who's 6'7" and lose the split decision. He has no business at all doing that. But those are like the outcomes. This is like distance striking matchup against a guy who's bigger and longer than you and you lose. Or he goes out there and like lands a big shot and knocks him out. Or maybe he goes out and out wrestles him. Or maybe he tries to out wrestle him and lands an illegal knee and gets disqualified. There's like a billion things that he could do out there that are the dumbest thing of all time. Or he could go look amazing. It's going to be one of the two. And you're kind of flipping a coin on whether he's going to go be an idiot or go be great. It's amazing to watch, honestly, because you don't know. You're in for a treat every time. But from like a bets and picks perspective, I love picking against him just on the fact that he may do something dumb. I picked against him with Blachowicz at Blachowicz was like plus 300. And I was like, oh, we're cooking one up here. Eventually didn't hit, but I mean, I'll take the draw outcome on that one. I don't think that was that bad of a pick or a bet. But point being, I just have zero trust in Ankalaev's thinking and thought process going into the octagon.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what happened in the first Johnny Walker fight. He was winning that one pretty easily, it seemed, and then he does something stupid, and the fight's a no contest.
And it should have been a DQ if it wasn't in Abu Dhabi, too.
That's something that concerns me because we've seen just trends in the past of these fighters of Arab descent and Muslim heritage getting a little bit of a benefit of the doubt at times. And that's just something that when I do place some bets, that's going to be in the back of my mind is, we all know how bad UFC judging is to begin with at times. UFC judging in Abu Dhabi has been even more questionable.
They're the Max Holloway versus Volk 2 culprits. I believe that was in Abu Dhabi.
think it was.
They got us.
And that goes to just the commissions over there, right? And it's not the same level of strictness, and the judges necessarily don't have to be vetted as much as other places.
I don't know. I think they may actually have some of the same judges as they roll out in Vegas, but heavy crowd influence. And I think there's a level
Okay.
of intimidation as to who the fight needs to be scored for. That is that's my opinion, personal opinion. Maybe completely out of line and incorrect, but I think there's a little bit of not stated pressure to score fights a certain way.
I want to say one of the other things too isn't because they don't always bring the same familiar faces of refs too.
There's a couple different ones.
That's okay, but no, I will say like you said Ankalaev didn't shoot till the 4th round in that Jan fight for a takedown.
Yeah, it was something stupid like that.
Yeah,
It might have been the 3rd round, but point being, it was way too late.
And that's what I don't get because everyone's kind of trying to convince me he's so great and elite because of his wrestling. Well, if he doesn't use it and stuff like that, then to me he just looks like a mid fighter on the feet. But I mean, like I don't know, it's tough. I probably will go with the favorite just because there is that chance of wrestling, and I know that he is extremely skilled in that area. And I want to say Rakic, maybe because with the leg kicks, I like his striking, all that stuff. But I guess it is going to hurt more than it will help. It's tough to pick Rakic when he just fought the perfect fight and still lost. And so I don't want to say that finish upside isn't there because it obviously is. And give or take, Jerry is I would say he's an extremely tough guy to finish. He has that warrior spirit. However, Pereira has knocked him out twice now. So, but I do think I'll probably side with I don't think I will go underdog and hoping on the certain ways to fully play out. I think I will go with the safer pick here and trust Ankalaev's striking enough against Rakic, and then with the thought or with the knowing that the wrestling advantage is there, and to really see if Ankalaev can get it done. But if you look at Ankalaev's past wins, they're just not impressive, really. But the other thing too is if Ankalaev can get stuff, we can finally get that Pereira matchup too, and maybe put all that stuff to bed as well.
Yeah. I'd love to see Ankalaev and Pereira because, like, I would love to see if he doesn't grapple Pereira. Like, to me, the funniest possible thing that could ever happen is he goes in there against Pereira, doesn't grapple at all, and gets knocked out. It'd be the funniest thing of all time to ever happen in mixed martial arts. And I hope it happens. It'd be hilarious. So that's my rooting interest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to take Ankalaev. He's such a big favorite for a reason. I just find it funny. For a guy who's always being hyped about, oh, he's this amazing grappler, he's this amazing wrestler, he has no submission finishes, and his only loss was being submitted. Sure, against Paul Craig, but
yeah,
if you're not finishing it, so that's my concern with him, and it's a boring style at times. He kind of just lays on you when he gets to the ground. He doesn't look for submissions really, and the ones he does clearly don't work out. So I'm going to take him. I think it'll be by a decision. But
and how impressed should we be on his recent run of like knocking out Johnny Walker? Like, then Johnny Walker gets turned around and gets knocked out by Volkan Oezdemir, and it's like, so should we care at all that you knocked out Johnny Walker? Like, Volkan Oezdemir may actually be his best win, to be honest. Like, that said, Rakic also lost to Volkan Oezdemir, so maybe Volkan Oezdemir is the key to this whole prediction. But yeah. I'll probably pick Ankalaev just on like a straight pick, but like I could never imagine like putting money on him to ever do anything in the UFC just because you never know what you're going to get, really.
I will say too for other people. I don't even want to say casuals, but maybe people that just because this is a huge pay-per-view event, and people that like me maybe that aren't really that fond of Ankalaev. This is a good spot though to just get in there and prove it too. Third fight on the card. So I mean there is a good prove it spot too because yeah, like you said, it was Johnny Walker, Anthony Smith, Thiago Santos are your last 3 wins. Head and shoulders, the Rakic win will be way more impressive than all of those too. So,
Yep. All right. Moving forward, this fight, absolute banger, Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige. Thank you, UFC. These are the type of fights that I love, and it'll probably go unappreciated all week. It probably won't be appreciated until they're in the octagon trading against one another, to be honest with you. At some point, these two are going to start trading. You're going to go, all right, wait a second. We got a banger here. Like, this is going to be a great fight. I'm pumped for this one. Odds are a little bit surprising, in my opinion. We've got Dan Ige as a plus 235 underdog with Lerone Murphy as a minus 320 favorite. As those are heavy odds, frankly, from a betting perspective, I think you got to go Ige, but that doesn't mean he wins. I just think the odds should be closer. But I have been really impressed with Lerone Murphy recently. His win over Edson Barbosa, I think he put everything together. The one thing that I've always said about Lerone Murphy is that he has a ton of skill. But it always felt like he was struggling to put it all together and just become like his full potential. And in that fight, I think he did it. Like, that was the one to me where he went from being someone with potential to being like, oh, that was legit. I'm interested to see if that trend continues, because to me, Danny Ige is a guy that I think highly of. And if you're going out there and have an impressive performance over Danny Ige, I'll tip my cap to you 10 out of 10 times and say you should move up those rankings and get a big fight. So at the same time, Dan Ige goes out there and gets a win. He's a guy you want to see move up in the rankings. So I think this is not only going to be a fan favorite scrap, but I think it's going to be an important matchup just in terms of how we're going to match make this 145-pound division moving forward. So I am absolutely pumped for this fight. I love this fight. Jerry, I think we swing it over to you first this time. What are your thoughts on this featherweight matchup?
Similar to what you kind of, Anthony, I think you said when we were talking about the Rakic fight, or one of you said it at 300. When Rakic and Yuri were fighting, that was the fight of the night until Max Holloway and Gaethje. I have a feeling this could be a fight of the night until Max Holloway and Ilia Topuria. It's going to be so much fun. Two guys who are just going to stand and bang and exchange like crazy. Always a little biased when it comes to watching the English fighters, but at the same time, Dan Ige was a dog in his last fight against Diego Lopez on 3 hours notice. And had that fight been a 5-rounder, he would have won that fight. And the Diego Lopez hype train would have been completely derailed. Sure, he hasn't looked great in some of his other fights recently. He's lost more than he's won in the last 7 fights. But no, he's still going to be in there, still Boston strong. Or no, he's Hawaiian, isn't he? Yeah, still whole. He's got the Hawaiian pride. I heard an interview yesterday with him. He was out there surfing on Monday or Tuesday, just enjoying that, and he seems like in a good place going into this fight. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets a finish or gets the decision win. I just am excited to see two guys who are very good at what they do just stand and bang.
Yeah, I agree. I look at it as like that an Ige fight. I was trying to find another name besides Font, but I look at it like a Font, and I was maybe going to pick a Gilbert, maybe not Gilbert anymore, but it's just always a tough out, no matter if he's fighting up or down in the, even depending on the matchup a little bit too, but he's just one of those fights, like he wins fights he shouldn't win, or he wins fights that are close. It just depends. Like it's just always going to be a tough one. So that going, I think, Lerone Murphy, this will be a tough one for him, but that last fight really being, because I had seen Murphy a couple times before that, but I really sat down and I was there for that Barbosa fight, and I thought he looked awesome in that fight. So if that was if James was saying that was the fight where he put it all together, well, that was the perfect first fight for me to really be keyed in, to be like, oh, what does this guy have? Because yeah, I thought he looked amazing. So I do think that's a pretty wide margin too on those odds, but I am going to go Murphy. But my respect for Ige always being in there, 50K for a reason, tends to always do well with getting bonuses and stuff, or putting on good performances. So I think this will be a tough one. And I don't think, I think Ige obviously has a good chance to win this, but if you're telling me this Lerone Murphy can go back to back with that performance with Barbosa, and then I assume it's going to be a good competitive fight and get one right back to back it with Ige. I'm there for it. That's makes me really excited for his future, and hopefully he gets if he can get the win, get a big boost up to throw his name in the top 5, top 7. I'd have to look at the full rankings, but get really closer to a possible title shot.
Yeah. And Murphy's a guy with a pretty blank slate as well. Really just that Barbosa fight.
Mhm.
Ige, the one flaw with Ige is he's been around for so long. You got to start looking at rematches. That's the one issue with him moving up the rankings. Murphy, it's like he's fought Barbosa, and now there's the Ige fight. Everyone else is unranked. And the thing that really I think is interesting about Ige is he has been in a lot of tough fights with a lot of great fighters. Like his resume, he beat Barbosa in a split, albeit that was 2020. So since 2020, he's gone out there against Kelvin Cater, Gavin Tucker, Korean Zombie, Josh Emmett, Mosvar Evelev, Damon Jackson, Nate Landwehr, Bryce Mitchell, Andre Feely, and Diego Lopez. Like that's a hell of a run of fighters in that featherweight division. And all those guys, he didn't get finished once. Josh Emmett, Korean Zombie, Kelvin Cater. Especially at that point in time, we're talking 2-3 years ago when those guys were arguably better than they are now. So he wasn't getting finished. He was going out there and having close fights with those guys. The Josh Emmett fight was close. The Cater fight was close. I think Korean Zombie got him pretty easily, but he grappled a lot. Evelev got him pretty easily as well, but he grappled the whole fight. And then Bryce Mitchell, I think he beat Bryce Mitchell. Everyone talks about damage over control time and scoring, and then they go out there and score Bryce Mitchell against Dan Ige, even though he's got, 2 busted eyes. But that's a whole nother discussion. I'm just a little bit salty because I bet on Ige in that fight. But I love Ige. I think this is going to be a great fight. I think Ige is going to make a good account for himself, but I do have to tip my cap to Lerone Murphy looking sensational. So I am going to have to pick him and ride with him, but listen, I love picking Dan Ige to win fights, so it's nothing against Dan Ige.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat. I think Lerone Murphy's going to get it done. But anytime Dan Ige is fighting, it seems to be some sort of entertainment. Then usually it puts on a good fight.
Mm-hmm. All right, last fight on this main card, we've got Shara Bullet against Armen Petroysan. They did the good old Shara Bullet special. We got him over in the Middle East fighting a dude who cannot grapple to save his life. Which, in terms of television, makes for a good fight because Shara Bullet will go out there and trade, and they're booking him against guys who will go trade with him. This time it's Armen Petroysan. Anthony, it's your turn, or I'll throw out the betting odds first. Betting odds. This is the closest fight on the main card from a betting perspective. I'd say the average line is looking like plus 130. Petroysan with Shara, a minus 155 favorite. So closest by a decent margin on this main card. Anthony, what do you make of the main card opener?
I don't really care for it, to be honest, but I know they're still trying to hype up Shara Bullet. He was sold to me as a Magomedov that's supposed to be able to strike a little bit. I thought he took entirely way too long to finish Tricoli in that first fight. I don't know how that fight went to the third, but he did get the finish though. So there is that. But I guess if anything, is that only 2 fights for him in the UFC? So
It's 3.
And is it 3?
3, yeah.
Okay. And then his last fight too. That dude's serviceable. The guy he beat. I don't want to give a chance at pronouncing his last name, but yeah. So I guess I am being too hard. Here's another spot. I don't think Petrosian's that good, but a name, I guess, to kind of like I would say, prove it. They're setting him up. It's opening of a pay-per-view. Pretty big pay-per-view. So if there was a time to fully live up to some of that hype, it would be here. So he has a great chance to do that.
Yeah, I kind of expect it to be like you said, you put it, James, a Shara Bullet special of him going out there and beating the hell out of Armen Petroysan for 2 rounds, getting a finish there in the second is my prediction. But it's also like this fight's going to stay on the feet, so maybe it is a good one to open up the main card just to get the crowd into it and create that atmosphere. But I'm with you also, Anthony. Like, this fight has no. If I was to miss any fight, it'd be this one because even the prelims seem more entertaining and have more at stake to an extent.
Yeah. I'm actually going to swing the opposite way on this one. I'm going to take Petroysan to win. I just really don't think Shara is very good. I think it's a lot of flash over substance in his game. And he went out there and got taken down by Mika Olajaychuk. We saw Olajaychuk go out there against Kevin Holland, land a knockdown against Kevin Holland, and then get instantly subbed when it went to the ground. Kevin Holland subbed him with an armbar in 15 seconds. The guy can't grapple at all. He's lost every single time he's fought a competent grappler. That guy went out there and took Shara down, landed the takedown. So in this fight, like Armen Petroysan, he can't really grapple either, but he can kind of sort of grapple, which is better than not grapple at all. So I think he could kind of sort of grapple his way to a decision. And on the feet, he's probably maybe he's a better striker, maybe he's not. I think it's at least close. So I'm taking Petroysan. And this is one where you do have to be a little bit worried with if this is a close decision. Do we think they scored against the Magomedov? Probably not. That would be my biggest concern on the Petroysan side of things.
Yeah. I pulled up again. I'm looking at the stats. Shara hasn't attempted a single takedown.
He can't. I don't think he knows what a double leg is.
Exactly. His takedown defense is only 71%. Not saying that Petroysan by any means, but he's at least averaging some sort of takedown. And he's landing with a 33% accuracy, which honestly I don't think that's very good at all. So this has the potential to be a very ugly and very tedious fight.
If Petroysan attempts 3 takedowns, I think he's landing at least 2 of them. I think he's breaking the 33% here.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I don't fully have a pick. I just want to say that I just thought it was funny. They were like, with the wave of the wrestlers coming over with not doing much damage and stuff. They're like, no, hold on. We got some new people coming out that are exciting strikers. And I was just like, oh, if you think Shara an exciting striker, you guys are cooked. Your scene is absolutely cooked for entertainment.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to some final thoughts on the card. The prelims are stacked, so there are plenty of options to pick from, whether it be the prelims, whether it be the main card, something we've already talked about. Any final thoughts on this card, wherever you want to approach it from? Anthony, I believe it is your turn to lead us off. Are there any final thoughts for you on the card?
Are we doing the whole card or picking some of the fights we like?
Whichever you want. We can do the whole card.
All right, man. I'll start, I guess, real quick. Just I think overall, I do think it is a great card that they put together. It's good for a little October spot, second of the month too, which is always nice.
Mhm.
I think we kind of talked about it heading into the October, November, December. We do tend to get some little stronger cards. So overall, happy with that. The fight I'll pick out would be Jeff Neal, RDA. RDA, I always say, is a tough out, even for how old he is, but it's getting less and less tough, it seems, just with this age. But he is so skilled. He just was so good too at his prime, and it's just not that anymore. But I think Jeff Neal is a dog. He's one of my favorite fighters in the rankings to always watch fights. I think like he has entertaining fights, good striking, and heavy hands too. So I think a knockout, to say that if you were to knock out RDA, I think that would be pretty solid, because I would have to check, but I can't remember RDA's. Okay, got knocked out by Fiziev in 2022, but then besides that, I'm already at 20.
He doesn't get knocked out often.
That's what I was saying. So 2019, I'm not seeing another one. So I think that would be a pretty crazy outcome right there, and I do think it is in the cards. And then the other one I pick up, I want to say I'll leave. I do like Bruno Ferreira, but I think someone else likes Abus a little bit, so I'll leave that fight on the table, and I'll just kind of lay this one up for someone to pick off. I think the Kennedy and Nchoku Chris Barnett one, I know it's been getting less. because there's a huge size disadvantage and body type difference too. So that one, I know even some of my friends were already kind of excited for that just off the aspects alone that are going into that. But so that'll be the second one I'll choose.
Yeah, that was going to be one of the ones I said as well. It just seems like it's going to be just entertainment.
Yeah. Just to add on that before you go any deeper, Jerry, I have already been sent Chris Barnett plus 525 bet slips from my friends. So my friends are locked and loaded on this.
That's it. That was the other thing too. 525. This is
crazy.
wild.
It is wild.
I mean, I'm pretty sure isn't Kennedy just moving up a division now? Because he's been at light heavyweight.
First heavyweight fight. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, he's a 6'5" light heavyweight. God damn. So it's going to be fun. Something's going to happen one way or another, I think. But the other one I'm kind of intrigued in is the fight right before it. Farid Basharat and Victor Hugo. I mean, Basharat's 12-0. He's got 7 finishes. And then Hugo's kind of just come onto the UFC scene. He won on Dana White on the Contender Series, I believe, won by a submission there. Now, then he fought his first UFC fight, and he's looked good. He's been on like a 15-fight win streak. So one of these guys is going to get an L this weekend, and I think it could be an entertaining one with two guys who clearly know how to win fights and know how to get finishes.
Yeah, I agree. I'll throw out there Mateusz Rombecki versus Mikdebek Orblai. Mikdebek Orblai looks like someone who was born in the 1st century. Like, I don't even know what the earliest human being to ever be is, but I think Orblai is a descendant of those people. He's a bizarrely looking human being, but my God, he is good at fighting. And Rebecki is a challenging fight. I think Rebecki is coming off a loss to Diego Ferreira, where Ferreira was a big underdog. But I still think this is not a layup at all. 2 good grapplers, so I'm interested to see what that fight looks like.
That was one of my other picks too.
Yeah,
I figured you would go for that one. I figured.
Yeah, that was the number one on my list. So good read on that. I'll also just mention that Abus and Bruno Ferreira fight because I think that's going to be an entertaining fight. Bruno Ferreira has absolute bricks for hands. Anyone who's knocking Gregory RoboCop Rodriguez out like he did, I'm going to watch the rest of your fight. You could never win again, but I will be there to see what the hell happens because he's got bricks in his hands. Abus Magomedov has been a little bit of a letdown since he originally got hot in the UFC. They threw him into a main event with Sean Strickland very early on. Did not go well for him. Lost to Kaio, but I believe he bounced back with a win since then. So I'm interested to see if he can keep climbing back or whether he's going to eat a brick for a hand and get knocked out. I think those are the options for him. So, yeah, I think that's the type of fight we have on our hands here.
That is my other issue, I'll say, with that Shara Bullet fight is we just listed like 3 other fights that I think could be the opener, but
yeah,
I digress.
I agree.
Even just going to throw one more out there is that final featured prelim, that looks like it could be an entertaining fight as well. Ibo Alasan and Rafael Sequeira.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't know anything about this Rafael fella, but I know Iban Aslan throws his hands around a little bit, and he's wacky. He's one of those light heavyweights where I don't know if he's the best fighter in the world, but it's a light heavyweight fight. We'll say that.
Yeah, and I mean, I've just done very brief research on Rafael in the last 2 minutes. I don't know how Demon Fight is. There's a promotion, but he has 8 knockouts, 2 submissions, and 11 wins. So he comes out there to put a body down. So that's why I think that could be very entertaining. And it's his UFC debut, so that's an extra level of intrigue.
Yep, UFC
that's
debut
funny.
There, so
that's probably one of our first times not touching the featured prelim. We're picking fights we like on the prelims.
That one went from opening the card to suddenly being the featured prelim. Yeah. I don't know exactly how that happened, especially when you have RDA and Jeff Neal on the card.
Yeah.
Like that would, to me, I thought that was a layup for like a featured prelim. But maybe the UFC knows something I don't. And like I said, I don't know anything about one of the two guys in the fight. So maybe they're cooking something up. Maybe we're going to look back at this and think they were idiots for doing it a week from now. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But regardless, that fight could be terrible, and the rest of the card probably make up for it. I think we got a good one on our hands here. No matter how you shake them up or order them, it's going to be a good fight card. A lot of important fights, a lot of meaningful fights, a lot of good fighters, a lot of entertaining matchups. It's everything you want. A title on the line. Like we said earlier, the main event is probably the best fight that you can make in MMA. We have a Robert Whittaker and Khamzat Chimaev co-main event. Hopefully, just a lot of things to like with this card. Should be a fun one. So thank you to everyone who tuned in for us breaking it down. We went a little long, but sometimes you have to with some of these pay-per-views. When you have Ilia, Topuria, and Max Holloway in the main event, it's that's not a fight you can just skim over. You got to dive into that one. So thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening to us. Make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you head over to Vendetta Sports Media for more UFC content as well. And we'll be back next week breaking it all down. So if you enjoyed this one, make sure to come back next week.